Welcome to Khafre's funerary complex. Since the very beginning of the 4th dynasty, mortuary temples were built adjacent to pyramids on the eastern side. Such a location, facing the rising sun, as well as the world of the living as a whole. In its standard form, a mortuary temple was divided into 2 parts. A front area which consisted of a vestibule and a courtyard, and an area in the back. The largest of all such structures, Khafre's mortuary temple, was entirely from a nearby quarry and encased with granite. Parts of Khafre's mortuary temple, particularly the courtyard walls, are thought to have been decorated with splendid reliefs. However, not a single image of the king has been discovered inside the mortuary temple. Khufu's direct successor, Jedefre, followed the custom which required each king to establish a new site for their funerary accommodation, and chose Abu Rawash as his last resting place. When the time came to build his own funerary complex, Khafre, also one of Khufu's sons, and the successor. Not only did Khafre thumb his nose at tradition, but he did so in a way which he hoped would allow him to overshadow. Though Khafre's pyramid is smaller than Khufu's, it was cunningly built on a more elevated bedrock layer than the Great Pyramid, making it appear higher than any other pyramid at Giza. Today, Khafre's pyramid is the only one among the 3 at Giza that still has the upper part of its limestone casing. Considered a most sacred area, the Giza necropolis was strictly defined, both geographically and physically. An 8-meter thick Tura limestone wall completely surrounded the great. From the reign of Sneferu and onwards, the subsidiary pyramid became a common feature within the pyramidal complex. In mainstream media, the Ka is often defined as the soul of the deceased. The truth is a bit more complicated. Within the ancient Egyptian funerary belief, within Khafre's subsidiary pyramid, a wooden box containing pieces of cedar was discovered by archaeologists. When reassembled, it turned out to be a shrine mounted on a sled. Just as with the solar barges found around Khufu's pyramid, it seems Khafre's shrine and sled were ritually disposed of after his.
Welcome to Menkaura's funerary complex. The dimensions of Menkaura's pyramid are much less grandiose. However, unlike its predecessors, Menkaura's pyramid shows a great deal of complexity in its internal and external finish. The outside was the upper one was abandoned during the construction phase, whereas the lower one, slightly above the base of the monument. While Menkaura's pyramid complex was unfinished at the time of his death, it was hastily and somewhat shabbily completed by his successor, Shepseskaf. Even so, this funerary structure marks a watershed in the history of this kind of monument. From then onwards, the pyramid Menkaura's causeway was completed in mud brick by the king's successor, whereas the lower part was nothing more than a simple ramp. As for the Valley Temple, it was built in 2 phases. The foundations were first laid out in limestone during Menkaura's reign, but the temple itself. 3 small structures, referred to as Menkaura's Queen's Pyramids, were erected along the southern side of the main pyramid. One of them was a smooth-faced pyramid, while the other 2. The easternmost pyramid was built with the traditional rooms and corridors found within a satellite pyramid meant to house the king's ka. However, a granite sarcophagus was found within, leading to the conclusion that it was used as an actual tomb rather than as a symbolic cenotaph. Drawing on these observations, some assume that this pyramid was first built as a satellite pyramid for the king's ka, before seeing its purpose change to that of a queen's tomb. Which queen, however, remains a mystery. Welcome to The Origin of the Pyramid. The origin of the word pyramid is controversial. Most believe that it originates with the Greek word pyramis, which referred to a During the pre-dynastic period, the development of funerary practices was different, depending on whether one was located in Lower Egypt or Upper Egypt. Well before the pyramid, there was the burial pits. It is on the site. In Upper Egypt, pre-dynastic practices are easier to study, but reveal more complex funerary rites. They are divided into two cultural phases, Badarian and Nagada. The Badarian phase ranged from 4400 BCE to 3800 BCE. During the three Nagada periods ranging from 4000 BCE to 3510 BCE, the term mastaba, meaning massive bench in dialectal Arabic, refers to a form of funerary architecture that was present in Egypt from the Archaic period to the Middle Kingdom. The arrangement of the substructure of the mastaba evolved during the course of the Old Kingdom. From the 6th dynasty would see art used to its utmost. The entire surface of a mastaba would be covered in scenes of daily life, illustrating the prosperity of those lucky enough to comfortably spend eternity near the pyramid of a pharaoh. The best example of this type of mastaba is the tomb of Mereruka in Saqqara. Welcome to Artisan. It was under the watchful eye of Ptah of Memphis, the god of craft and architecture, that ancient Egyptians developed the unique rendition. Ancient Egyptian craftspeople created both art and a wide variety of mundane, everyday tools. Every item created. Art, in all its forms, has offered not only a practical insight into the way ancient Egyptians lived, but in ancient Egyptian culture, drawing was used as illustration, such as seen in the Book of the Dead. It was also the first step in the creation of a relief, painting, or statue. Two-dimensional representations were concerned with order and form, and were intended to honor gods and promote the transition of the soul to the afterlife. Stylistically, Egyptians were concerned with the depiction of the human form's inner self. As such, an exception to this were scenes depicting hunting and battle, where the environment and enemies moved in lively. Reliefs could be either in high relief or low relief. Either method required a surface suited to the desired technique. For reliefs, preliminary sketches were drawn in red. Statues were believed to be vessels for the souls of the deceased, or deities. That is why a sculptor was called the one who makes it live. In ancient Egypt, the profession of crafter was organized and relied on a specific hierarchy. At the domestic level, most Egyptians were craftspeople to a greater or lesser extent. The ability to repair. An ancient text known as the Satires of Trades has a number of descriptive summaries that offer teasing glimpses into how artisans were perceived. A coppersmith was said to stink and have fingers that resembled. Located near the Valley of the Kings, Deir el. Archaeologists believe the site was home to skilled and respected artisans for over 400 years. It is considered one of the most important discoveries relating to Egyptian daily life. While much of the focus of Egyptian archaeology was on its kings and queens, it wasn't until the excavation of Deir el-Medina that Egyptologists were given a valuable window into the community life of ancient Egyptian artisans. Welcome to The mummification process used by ancient Egyptians was highly ceremonial in nature. The different types of mummification took into account the social level and richness of the deceased and even included animals. The most expensive was that reserved for the pharaoh. The first step was cleaning. Once bodies arrived at the mummification site, they were placed on inclined tables while the bodily fluids drained away. They were then cleansed by priests until they were deemed. The purification of the body began with a libation from sacred water. The priest then fumigated the body with terebinth resin. After the ritual cleansing, priests used. Once the body was properly purified, embalmers removed the organs, following very specific procedures. First, the brain was extracted by inserting a... After taking care of the brain, embalmers made an incision on the left flank and carefully set aside the viscera. The inside of the body was also... Canopic jars were placed close to the sarcophagus or kept in a chest nearby. At first, the viscera were wrapped. Towards the middle of the New Kingdom, canopic jars assumed the appearance of the four sons of Horus. They were known as the protector. Natron is a naturally occurring mineral found in evaporite. Embalmers used natron as a desiccant to dry the flesh and stop the corpse's putrefaction process. Once the body was cleansed and eviscerated, the deceased was covered in natron for about 40 days. Once desiccated, the body was prepared to be wrapped in strips. Once the body was fully desiccated by the natron treatment, embalmers oiled, painted, and sometimes even added hair extensions or a wig. They often used a henna-based antiseptic preparation to give the body a more colorful and lively appearance while preparing it. Next came the phase which gave mummies their most well-known appearance, the wrapping. Originally, each part of the body was wrapped separately. Men had their arms crossed on their chests, while women had the right arm folded over their breasts and the left arm stretched along the body. However, techniques evolved over time. Eventually, the body as a whole was wrapped with limbs alongside the body, and increasingly sophisticated and different techniques of weaving flax bands were developed. Welcome to the major regions of Egypt. Life in ancient Egypt was concentrated along the shores of the Nile and divided into two regions. Lower Egypt was situated on the Nile Delta near the Mediterranean, and Upper Egypt was at the south reaching into Africa. Due to its proximity to the Mediterranean, until 3100 BCE and the unification of Egypt, each region had its own pharaoh and crown. Lower Egypt's crown was red and marked with symbols of papyrus and bees. Upper Egypt's crown was white with symbols of lotus and sedge grass. Both regions had competing major cities, most notably Memphis, having their own major gods. Many of the temples were designed in such a way as to represent the two regions, and ceremonies often incorporated Upper and Lower Egypt in their rituals.
Welcome to Temples and Priests. From its foundation, the city of Memphis favored worship. Temples were the center of religious, political, and economic life in ancient Egypt. These sacred places were viewed as the literal home of the gods and goddesses. As such, every aspect of them required care and reverence, all of which was accomplished through elaborate ritual. Located in the center of Memphis, the Temple of Ptah was the most prominent and imposing building in the city. The long walkway leading toward the temple, known as the Dromos, was guarded by rows of sphinxes. The entire sacred area was designed to keep the statue of the god protected, deep within the sacred enclosures that surrounded it. The Dromos opened into a courtyard, with the surrounding portico graced with columns carved to resemble palm trees. During special festivals, the Memphis Alabaster Sphinx was discovered in 1912, almost completely buried in water and sand. 8 meters in height and weighing in at roughly 90 tons, it is still mounted on its original pedestal. Though it is called the Alabaster Sphinx, it was in fact carved from common calcite rock, which is similar in appearance and texture to alabaster. Erosion has destroyed the original engravings, making it difficult to determine when it was created. Egyptologists believe that its facial likeness resembles Amenhotep II, and so it could have been sculpted somewhere between 1700 and 1400 BCE. It is believed that this monument once stood outside of the Temple of Ptah and was integrated into subsequent extensions to the complex.
يترو عادجت بجو تاويتري آمن خاكو
حتمسك
هاي ما
نجحة
Let's hit.